If this article appears before you, pause for a moment, not to believe, not to agree, but to listen. According to the Advaita Vedanta wisdom that Ramana Maharshi fully embodied in his very presence, nothing happens outside of the single consciousness. What you call accidental or accidentally seen is in fact just consciousness calling itself back. It is not you who found this article. The truth is finding you. Ramana Maharshi never claimed to be a master, nor did he try to convince anyone. But his presence has a strange power to dissolve every story the mind constructs about itself. He does not bring new knowledge. He takes away the falsehood. In a world where the ego is celebrated, where everyone is encouraged to become someone, Ramana emerges as a living paradox. He becomes no one, and therefore, he is everything. This article is not intended to teach you anything more. If you read it with the right mindset, it will take away the burden of having to become. And if there is a very familiar feeling when you read these lines, as if you have known it for a long time, then congratulations. That is the true self realizing itself. The ego is a game, but a dangerous game ***. Ramana Maharshi said it simply, but that simplicity made the mind tremble. The ego is just a thought. When that thought vanishes, what remains is you. The ego is not evil. It is not an enemy. It is merely an unproven assumption. From a young age, you learn to say I am this body. I am this story. I am the one thinking. But Ramana asked a question that shattered that entire foundation. Where did this I come from? The ego is like a character in a play who forgets what role they are playing. They believe they are real, that the world revolves around them, that they must fight, achieve, protect, and survive at all costs. The game of the ego is dangerous not because it is evil, but because you believe it is you. When the ego says, I am suffering, I am seeking enlightenment, I fear loss, Ramana doesn't argue. He simply points out, find out who that I is, and the miracle happens. When you turn inward to find the ego, you never find it as an independent entity. You only find thoughts that come and go, like clouds drifting across the sky. The ego only exists when it is noticed, just as darkness only exists when there is no light. The moment you truly look directly at it, the game ends, not with victory, but with the absence of the player. Who am I? The question that ends all questions, ***. In the entire treasury of human spiritual knowledge, there are few questions as utterly simple, and so utterly that they end all searching, as the question posed by Ramana Maharshi. Who am I? Not, what should I do? Not, how can I be happy? Not, how can I attain enlightenment? Because all those questions assume that a real I already exists, an entity in need of improvement, liberation, or its aimant. Ramana goes straight to the root. He doesn't fix the ego, he exposes it. 1. Who am I? Is not a philosophical question. This is what many people misunderstand. Who am I? Is not for contemplation, not for analysis, not for finding a verbal answer. Ramana Maharshi emphasizes, the question, who am I, is not about finding an answer. It is about destroying the questioner. When you ask, who am I, with your mind, you only create more thoughts. But when that question is turned back to the very source of I, something completely different happens. You begin to realize that I appears as a thought. That thought appears in awareness, and that awareness is not the individual I. 2. Self-inquiry, the knife that cuts the root of the ego. Ramana doesn't offer many techniques. He only offers a direction to turn back. Every time the thought, I arises, whether it's, I am sad, I am afraid, I am searching for truth, I am reading this article, he advises, ask, where does this self come from? Don't answer, don't analyze. Just turn your attention back to where I originated. Initially, the mind resists. Because the ego lives by movement, it cannot exist in silent return. But if you are patient, a truth becomes apparent. You do not find I as an entity. You only find pure presence that is aware. And at that moment, the ego is not destroyed. It dissolves itself, like darkness dissolving in light. 3. I is never the subject. It is always the object. This is the key point in Ramana's teachings. Whatever you can observe cannot be you. You observe the body, you are not the body. You observe emotions, you are not emotions. You observe thoughts, you are not thoughts. You observe the thought, I. So what is I? The I that you once believed to be the center of life is actually just a subtle object of perception. When this is seen not by the intellect, but by profound intuition, a natural liberation occurs. There is no one to liberate. There is no one to enlighten. Only the true self recognizes itself. 4. When the question dissolves, the truth is revealed. The ultimate point of who am I is not an answer. The ultimate point is living silence. Ramana said, when the question who am I is held long enough, the question dissolves, and what remains is the true self. It's not that you've achieved anything new. You've overcome an ancient misconception. And it is here that we move on to the next part, the place that many fear the most, but also where freedom begins. When the ego ends, life doesn't disappear. Only illusions disappear, asterisk, asterisk. One of the greatest fears of those seeking enlightenment is, if the ego vanishes, what will I have left? Will I still be able to live a normal life? Will life become meaningless? Ramana Maharshi smiled at these questions because they stem from a mistaken assumption that the ego is what is living this life. 1. The ego has never truly lived. It only takes over. The simple yet shocking truth. Life has never needed the ego to function. Your heart beats without me. Your breath occurs without me. Your natural intellect acts without me. The ego only comes later and says, I am doing this. Ramana calls the ego the imposter. It takes credit for all actions that occur in nature. When the ego ends, action does not stop. Only the illusion of the one acting disappears. 2. Enlightenment does not destroy life. It restores life to its rightful place. A person who has directly perceived the true self still eats, still sleeps, still works, still talks, still loves, but no longer burdened by the I am the doer. Ramana emphasizes, an enlightened person is no different from an ordinary person in their actions. The only difference is they no longer have the notion of I behind their actions. This is true freedom, not freedom to do anything, but freedom from the one who must do it. 3. Suffering ends not because life changes, but because the one who suffers disappears. Suffering requires two elements: an experience, a I, who claims that experience is their own. When the I dissolves, the feeling remains. The situation still occurs, but there is no longer a personal center to accumulate suffering. This is what Ramana calls living in the world, but not belonging to the world. 4. When the game ends, simplicity becomes sacred. After the ego ends, there are no fireworks, no titles, no feeling of I have achieved. Only simplicity, naturalness, deep presence, and an uncaused peace. Ramana Maharshi once said, happiness does not come from achieving something. It is your nature when you stop searching. And if you've read this far with a feeling of peace, a sense of familiarity, a feeling of not needing anything more, then know that the game of the ego is drawing to a close. Silence, the highest teaching of Ramana Maharshi, asterisk, asterisk. If one had to summarize the entire teaching of Ramana Maharshi in a single word, it wouldn't be enlightenment, nor who am I, nor self-questioning. It would be silence, but not the silence of the mouth ceasing to speak, not the stillness of a room. It is the silence of the source, where no thought has ever arisen. 1. Why did Ramana teach in silence? Many people came to Aranakula, sat before Ramana Maharshi, and were disappointed. He didn't give long lectures. He didn't preach eloquently. He often just sat. But those who sat long enough realized something was happening beyond words. Ramana once said, "Silence is the most powerful teaching. Words are only for those who cannot understand silence, because ultimate truth cannot be conveyed through concepts. All words belong to the mind, and the mind can never reach the true self. There is only one way. The mind must be still." 2. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is pure life. Many people fear silence because when there is no noise, the ego loses its foothold. But the silence that Ramana speaks of is not nothingness. It is the foundation of all experience. Before a thought, there is silence. Between two thoughts, there is silence. After the thought has vanished, silence remains. Silence neither comes nor goes.
Only noise comes and goes. Ramana points out a subtle truth. You don't enter silence. You are always silent. You just forget it because you're busy chasing thoughts. When you sit before Ramana,
the mind gradually slows down, not because he does something, but because his presence reflects the inherent silence within you. 3. Silence is a natural state, not an achievement. A common mistake of practitioners is trying to achieve silence, but any effort belongs to the ego, and the ego cannot create something that will destroy itself. Ramana clearly states, don't try to control the mind. Find out where the mind comes from. When you inquire about the origin of the mind dissolves on its own, and silence manifests naturally. Silence is not the result of practice. Silence is the absence of effort. 4. In silence, all questions disappear. In true silence, there are no more questions. There are no more questioners. There are no more answerers. Not because you know everything, but because you realize no one needs to know. Ramana Maharshi rarely answered questions in the way the questioner expected, because he looked directly at where the question originated and let it vanish right there. Silence doesn't solve problems. Silence makes the problem disappear. Applying Ramana's wisdom to modern life, ***. A very practical question is often asked. If everything is just the self, how do I live my ordinary life? What about work, family, society, money? Ramana Maharshi never advised escaping from life. He did not create a life separate from the world. He only pointed out one thing: live without carrying the ego. 1. Work, but do not lose yourself. In modern life, action is unavoidable, but suffering does not come from action. Suffering comes from the notion of, I am the doer. When working, do your best, do your dedication, but don't add the lie to your actions. Ramana teaches, actions happen according to natural law. The ego only claims to be the one acting. When you work from presence, higher efficiency, less fatigue, less conflict, because energy doesn't leak through the ego. 2. Relationship without attachment. In relationships, the ego is very subtle. It wants to be recognized. It wants to be loved. It fears abandonment. Ramana doesn't teach how to love better. He teaches how to see clearly who is demanding to be loved. When you realize there is no separate I, there is no truly separate other, then love becomes natural, unconditional. No more possession, control, expect. Only presence meets presence. 3. Suffering in life, the gateway back to the true self. Ramana did not deny suffering. He used it as a guide. Whenever suffering arises, ask, who is suffering? Don't ask why. Don't look for the cause. Just return to where the feeling, I am suffering, originates. If you are honest enough, you will see. The feeling is there, but the person suffering cannot be found. And in that moment, suffering loses its foundation for existence. For living as the true self in the phenomenal world. The highest application of Ramana wisdom does not lie in technique. It lies in the attitude of being, not resisting life, not running away from the world, not seeking anything else. Just be aware, be present, and let go of the idea of I am the center. Ramana once said, "Be who you are. Everything else will fall into place." And the miracle is, when you stop trying to fix life, life falls into harmony on its own. Namaste.